Hello, everybody. Welcome to the class. This is the Baal Shem Tov's advice. Very glad that you're here. We're just calling the WhatsApp group. See if anybody joins from there. Okay, so we're going to go through teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Let's see here. The first one, the Baal Shem Tov said that when a friend blesses another, this is received by Hashem far more impressively than even the great advocate of the Jews in heaven, the angel Michael. So basically what Hashem loves is love. That is what he's fundamentally looking for. Menachem, welcome. Good to have you. So Hashem loves love. And so therefore, my uncle told me that, in fact, the angels wait a whole year to collect when we bless each other. This is so precious to Hashem after Rosh Hashanah. So it is so precious to Hashem, the fact that we bless each other, that the angels, obviously the angels know what Hashem loves. I don't know how it works, but I guess Hashem's joy gives out a radiance, gives out a light to the entire heaven. So they wait a whole year just for a Jew to wish each other Gemar Chasima Taiva. A Jew wishes the fellow Jew love. And when we do this, this is very, very precious to Hashem. So it's very important to remember that when we act in love to a fellow Jew, not only are you making yourself happy, not only are you making them happy, you're making Hashem happy. When you make Hashem happy, you make the world happy. So there's really no greater thing that we can do than to act in love and kindness to one another. The Baal Shem Tov teaches the commandment to love, whether God or a fellow, is that one should deeply concentrate on those thoughts that inspire love. For one can be commanded to generate an emotion based on contemplating the positive in another. So, for example, when you are told in the Torah to love Hashem, it doesn't mean that you should automatically have a love. Rather, it means that you should think about it. And that's the whole idea of davening. We daven, we generate basically ideas and feelings. Like if you think about, wow, how great this person is to me, you will automatically generate a love. So Baal Shem Tov says the mitzvah to love your fellow Jew is primarily to feel the emotion of love through thinking about what is lovable. So it's about thinking about the fact that we're all one soul. You can see the beauty of the Jewish people, whatever it takes to generate this emotion within you. The Baal Shem Tov said, the love of one's fellow is the first doorway to Hashem. So in other words, the doorway to God is Avas Yisrael. The Rabbi actually speaks about this, that there are three main loves. There's the love of Hashem, there's the love of the Torah, and then there's the love of the Jewish people. So if a person says, I love the Torah, but I don't love Hashem, and I don't love a fellow Jew, that's obviously a problem. But it goes even deeper. If a person has Avas Yisrael, they have a love for their fellow Jews, eventually they will come to a love of Hashem and a love of the Torah, as we see very clearly. But if a person just has, let's say, the love of Hashem, love of Torah, they don't have Avas Yisrael, it's not something that's permanent. Because ultimately, the Torah and Hashem are meant to bring you to love of your fellow Jew. So it's a very important point. Sometimes a person, whatever, I think often in life what happens is that everybody's basically born loving. But we also are born with a sense that we want to feel safe, and we want to be, that we have within us an anxiety, a nervous system. I think they call it the parasympathetic nervous system or the sympathetic nervous system. So in other words, when a person, we're all hardwired, even a bug is hardwired, even a tree is hardwired to feel anxiety because we want to exist. We love ourselves. We want a sense of safety. So the problem is that when a person is under attack or perceived under attack, or they feel they're under attack. So we basically go into another state of consciousness or another operating system. And so in that state of consciousness, a lot of what a person may do is not out of love, but actually out of protection, out of fear. And you see this very interesting, like entire cultures are fear-based cultures, so there's no joy in it. And then there's a lot of, so part of love is joyful. So ironically, it's very important to try to feel safe in life, because the more safe we feel, the more love we can feel. And that's really one of the roles that a husband and a father brings to the table, is they bring a sense of safety to the children. I believe, I don't know if it's true, someone told me that there was a study that children that grew up unfortunately in divorced homes, they found it a little bit more difficult to form relationships later in life, because the relationship very much has to be based on trust. And, if a person's by nature, we're either feeling trusting or we're feeling distrusting. There's not much in between trust and non-trust. So if a person's feeling distrust, the ability to love someone, if you don't trust them, particularly if worse than you don't trust them, you feel that they're out to get you, because generally speaking, the heart is not very sophisticated. It's either going to feel kind of good towards everybody or almost bad towards everybody. So anyway, these are some extra details in terms of the importance of trying to feel safe, connected to Hashem, because when we do that, we have the ability to love properly. Now, the next thing the Baal Shem Tov says is very, very interesting. He says, we must love a Jew simply because he is a Jew. In other words, there's not a reason to love. Love is not something that's based on, oh, wow, I love that person because they're such a tzaddik, or I love that person because, as Baal Shem Tov says here, he says the difference between a scholar and somebody that's not learned is only an information. But regarding the soul, all are equal. So it's actually, I think, one of the great things of America is that it's a society which is very much, or at least used to be, based on respect for each person, that there's an innate quality to the human being. When a person has this idea, then they are respectful and loving of everyone. And so it doesn't matter how much a person knows, how much a person doesn't know. The titles are nice. Let's say a person is a Talmid Chacham, it's lovely, but it doesn't get to the essence. Even a baby is beautiful. It's a soul there. It's a human being. And this is kind of the essence of what a person has to have. Unfortunately, what's going on in a lot of modern society, and in many cultures, is that there's I think a lack of, I met this guy who was a professor from Harvard, had to leave Harvard because he was too liberal for Harvard, if you can even imagine that. And he himself was far from conservative. But bottom line is, he said that these philosophies are what they call nihilism, where they're just kind of self-destructive. And where does that come from? That comes from when a person basically, unfortunately, is in a high state of anxiety. So it's almost a form of the depression, and also a form of I'm doing what I'm doing because I have to. In other words, when a person is doing what they're doing because they choose to, it gives them a sense of joy, right? If I say, okay, you want to climb this mountain? You say, no. I say, well, you have to climb the mountain, whatever, I'm your boss or something. So every step is painful. But if I say you want to climb the mountain, you're like, yeah, what a great idea. So every step is joyful. What's the difference? Your choice. And so this is a very important thing, because only if a person's feeling free to exercise their choice, and they're exercising their choice, do they have that joy when they're doing it. And unfortunately, a lot of people, the reason they're behaving is not necessarily because they want to or they've chosen, but they've been criticized, they've been shamed into behavior. So they're doing a lot, like the Germans are a perfect example of this, like kind of this rigid kind of behavior. But meanwhile, beneath the surface is this tremendous savagery, this tremendous resentment. So because all of that behavior, you found that with the Japanese as well, that they were allies of the Germans and they were savages. So what happened to all that politeness? What happened to all that culture? What happened to it? You were all so organized and polite, and The answer is they were doing it out of fear. They weren't doing it out of love. And so when a society is busy, they say about the Japanese are not born, they're created. Like it's a whole weird culture. Like you bow your head this much to that guy and that much to that guy based on their standing. So it's a very, very strange culture. And they induce that culture not out of love, but out of fear, because a lot of people have this capacity, or a lot of cultures that, like, I mean, I lived in Africa. So in Africa, how do you teach a child to walk? They're one of two ways. Either you put the poor little kid on an anthill and he starts getting bitten by ants, or he starts to grow. He doesn't want to be bitten by ants. Or they put him outside in the rain and he doesn't want to get rained on. So this is not a culture where children feel loved, right? They're doing what they're doing because, I don't know, I mean, if parents that are willing to put their little baby on an anthill obviously are willing to slap the kid or do anything to the kid, so the kid basically learns to behave out of fear. And so it creates this kind of, what we saw in the Germans, this kind of savagery, because beneath all the behavior is not the desire to behave, the desire for love, the desire for friendship, but it's actually the fear of misbehavior, the fear of criticism. So, in fact, there was a book by a psychologist about this guy. He was like the teacher. Like, I forgot his name. I think his name was Dr. There was a guy in America that wrote a famous book on childcare. So he was like that in Germany, but he was very, very tough and very harsh. And his own kid became crazy because people need love to grow and to flourish. Okay. Let's continue. The Baal Shem Tov, in his years of being a hidden tzaddik, would travel to different cities and towns. He would gather the men and women and children and tell them stories with lessons from Ein Yaakov. Ein Yaakov is a part of the Torah which gives us very beautiful teachings. Everybody should study it. Very beautiful stories that you could learn a lot from. In one town, he told them about Rabbi Yaakov, who was a great genius, and he would study the Talmud by heart. However, when one studies by heart, one must be even more focused when you're not than like regular study, because you have to not only be focused on the subject, but you have to be focused on the words, because you're saying the words from memory. Once his young son came by and said something witty, so he stopped and really appreciated his son's wisdom. Similarly, says the Baal Shem Tov, when God asked the angels if he should make man, the angels were none too impressed. The angels were like, why should you make man? However, when a Jew goes to synagogue to daven and listens to the class in the synagogue, many synagogues they had between Mincha, Ma'ariv, and Yaakov, and takes something out of it, in other words, he learns something, a lesson in life, then God gathers all the angels and he says to them, you angels have no financial worries. However, this person correctly has a wife and children, which I demanded of him. Furthermore, he must support them, pay his taxes, etc. Yet he finds the time to go and learn and derive lessons in his life. So Baal Shem Tov said, when you meditate, cogitate, analyze the fact that it's the Jews that God brags about, this will arouse great love. In other words, Hashem is bragging about you. Right now, you're listening to a Torah class. You could be doing anything. So Hashem was going to the angels and said, look at my Yid. Look at what he's doing. And this is a tremendous thing, to think that the Eibush is bragging about us Yidden. The next is a very, very powerful teaching. And I'll share it with you in a sec. Hold on. I don't know. I can't highlight this. Yeah, very beautiful. In one of the Baal Shem Tov's holy talks, he said, behold, I testify by heaven and earth that in a serious judgment in the heavenly court on a person who passed on. Now, this person was quite unlearned. He could only say his prayers and the Tehillim, meaning he couldn't really read much, but he was extraordinarily loving. In his thoughts, he would always think about others. In his speech, he would always speak with love. And in his deeds, he did whatever he could to help everyone. So he sounds like he's a good guy. He would feel the pain of every Jew, whether man or woman, and rejoiced in their joys. The heavenly court decided that he would have a portion in heaven, but the great tzaddikim and scholars, upon whom our sages correctly say, are lovers of God. Baal Shem Tov continued, when a Jew sighs over the pain of a fellow, this sigh itself annuls all the negative decrees. Excuse me. And when we rejoice in the blessings of a fellow and wish him well, this is as precious to God as the prayers of Rabbi Shmuel, the high priest in the Holy of Holies. So it's so precious to Hashem when we bless our fellow Jews. So ultimately, what is a parent looking for? A parent is looking that their children should love each other. What does a parent love? The parent loves the children. So when the children love each other, this gives the parent tremendous nachas, tremendous pleasure. And so it's very important that we are kind of on the right page here, and we appreciate that Hashem loves love, and Hashem wants to see us loving one another. Okay. Let us continue. So the next teaching is also a very beautiful teaching. It says the most unlearned regular Jew has innate qualities as the greatest. In other words, once again, the Baal Shem Tov, one of the things the Baal Shem Tov brought to the world was he took down the boundaries between, wow, this person's a Talmid Chacham, he's a Torah scholar, he should be respected. That person, oh, they're just a peasant. In fact, it's hard for us to imagine because the Jewish world has been so affected by the Baal Shem Tov. But literally, there were different synagogues. There were synagogues for the Tanner, synagogues for these guys, those guys. Can you imagine people that they weren't even interacting properly? Baal Shem Tov was the one that really brought about, no, Hashem loves us all unconditionally. We're unconditionally loved. Okay. Now, let us continue. This is a very powerful teaching, one of the most famous teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. I'm sure you'll appreciate it. The Baal Shem Tov teaches that a neshama, a soul, will come down to live 70, 80 years for the sole purpose to help out another person. In general, this obviously pertains to their physical needs, but infinitely more so to their spiritual. And this was one of the things that the Rebbe tried to inculcate in us. The Rebbe taught us that we have to reach out to our fellow Jew, in fact, to all people, and teach them the mitzvahs that they have to know. A Yid that doesn't know the mitzvahs, we don't look at them askance. We don't look at them like they're a bad person, God forbid. Can't blame somebody who's brought up with parents that didn't know about it. How is he meant to know about it? But at the same time, if he does do the mitzvah, it's a tremendous benefit for his neshama. So our job is to really reach out. I mentioned the story last time when I said this, but somebody was once thinking about this. He was listening to a tape of the Rebbe in his car, and he was thinking about this thing. So he then missed the exit of his highway, and he was thinking, how do I know what my mitzvah is? And he turns off the highway, and there was an elderly couple, and they were standing over the bonnet of their car. It was overheating. And he thought, maybe this is the mitzvah. How can I help you? Turns out they're older couple. They're on their way to the airport. Now they've got a stuck car. He says, don't worry about it. I'm going to take you to the airport. I'm going to take your car back. I'll take care of everything. So they're very grateful. So he takes them to the airport. And they say, can we pay you? He said, no. I'm okay. I don't need money. So they said, we have to do something for you. What can we do? So he said, if you really want to do something, you can do a mitzvah. So the man got very angry and he says, no mitzvahs. So later when they're at the counter, the wife says, listen, I want to tell you the story. We're both Holocaust survivors and we have resentment to God for the Holocaust. And therefore my husband reacted that way. But I undertake to do Shabbos candles. And then he came back from the ticket counter. He tells the man, he says, you know what? I'm going to do tefillin. So who knows? These people went through hell. And maybe it was this person's mission in life to help this person. Now, obviously, we could have many missions. We can be helping and helping and helping. But it's very important. I'll share with you a story. It's not very well known. I heard this story from my cousin Binyamin Zilberstrom. So Binyamin Zilberstrom is a very big tzaddik. His brother-in-law, who is Rabbi, his name is slipping my mind. I don't remember the details, but his brother-in-law once was by the Rebbe in the morning, and he personally saw the story. So the Rebbe 3 times a week would see people till about 7 in the morning. The Rebbe used to learn every day 10 hours of Torah. Then the Rebbe was dealing with many letters. He had thousands of letters that he had to get through, people answering people's questions. So 3 times a week he would have what was called yichidus, a private meeting with the Rebbe. It could take 2 to 6 months just to get in, to have a turn. But in the end of the day, you were able to have your private meeting with the Rebbe. You would write something on a note. The Rebbe would read it, and he'd give you your answer. So the Rebbe spent a whole night doing yichidus, and in the morning, whatever, 7 a.m., the Rebbe's going home, maybe catch a little bit of shara. And there was Misnagdish Rosh Yeshiva, there was somebody that didn't know what's the story, how it works. So he comes in, he sees the Rebbe, he had a question. So he goes over to the Rebbe to ask him his question. So Rabbi Grona wanted to kind of shoo him away. So the Rebbe said, no, let him ask his question. So he asks his question. The Rebbe answers the question and he leaves. So what happened was, the Rebbe told Rabbi Grona, could be my soul came into this world just to answer this person's question. So this is very, very powerful because the Rebbe lived, and he's telling us to live on a consciousness. And I know somebody, he had a very powerful near-death experience. He was dead for 7 minutes. And he says, I don't know if it's true, but he says that every minute is like a year in heaven. He claims that he was 7 years in heaven, like obviously not dead for 7 years, but in experience-wise, he was 7 years in heaven. And he's very, very, very holy soul. And it's very interesting because he has also this clarity. My soul is here to do a mission. Most of us, our clarity is somewhat around, I really don't want to feel pain, and I really do want to feel pleasure. Now, of course, we also have ideals, we have things, but the fundamental human being starts off with this. We went through this yesterday with this idea of the pain and pleasure. And so even though we have hopefully higher ideals, but sometimes those things are not as strong as the body, which is why Freud actually says that people universally admire selfless people. If I say, what do you think about selfless people? You're like, amazing. So why aren't you selfless? I'm not saying that you're not, God forbid, but let's just use that example. So if you admire them so much, why aren't you selfless? The answer is because the body is selfish. So it's not that I'm not selfless. I'm a little selfless, but I'm also a little selfish. So the idea is to live in this consciousness. The Baal Shem Tov says, you should ask Hashem, please send me someone I could help today. The first Yid, why was he chosen to be a Yid, Avraham Avinu? Hashem, I don't know if you know this, but there were other people that discovered God. He wasn't the first guy that discovered God. There were other people that were conscious of God. But it says clearly in the Torah, Hashem chose him because he knew that he would teach other people. He knew his heart. He knew that he cared about people. So if Hashem chose him and Hashem revealed himself to him, he knew that he would reveal it to everybody else because he loves people so much. And so this is the first thing that we have to have in our heart, this love. And so maybe we'll do a little meditation because I feel that by nature we all love. It's just that we've been hurt. Because we've been hurt, many times what we're doing is we've taken a step back from love because we don't want to get hurt again. As we said, the nature of a person is phobic and addictive. Anything that gives me pleasure, I want more of. Anything that gives me pain, I become phobic, I want less of. And so when people give us pleasure, when we're young, hopefully, we want more of that. And we're open and we're vulnerable. But then when we get hurt, what do we want? We want less of that. So we may be functioning in life kind of like a robot. Functioning, robots today, it looks like you can program AI pretty much to function as a human being, but it's not real. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have feelings. It's all in the head. It's very interesting that I'm mentioning this now because just yesterday, Ashkocha Pratis, somebody showed me AI what do you call it, a podcast. And it's really good. People discussing. It's very interesting. And the thing is, you say, okay, well, here you have a podcast and people are talking and they're discussing and sounds engaging. What's the problem? The problem is it's not people. It doesn't have a heart, it doesn't have a soul. It can't cry and it can't love and it can't hug you. All this stuff, all this intelligence is in a certain sense a tool. It's not the real thing. People are worried somewhat. When AI gets to the level where it can have a podcast, it's like, okay, so what about us? Where are we? And the answer is that you can do something. One of my, I don't know if one of my heroes, but somebody that I guess I admire is Sam Walton. Sam Walton made, my camera went off. Why did my camera go off? Oh, maybe it went back on. So Sam Walton, he made, hello, welcome, Revison. Sam Walton made Walmart and Sam's Club. So Sam Walton was really a very, very special person. And he certainly brought a lot of cheap prices to America. And one of the things that I like about him is that he was a very humble person. He never went extravagant. And Robin, welcome. And Sam Walton was he was a special guy. And so he said that there was a book that came out, How to Beat Walmart, because in the olden days, it was more like these little mom and pop shops. So Walmart came with its great prices and came to town and maybe put a lot of people out of business. So Sam Walton said, I'll tell you how to beat Walmart. Listen to this, very important. Sam Walton said, I can never do what you can do. He owned chain stores, billions of dollars are coming through. He says, you are an individual. You can stand by your store and welcome people. In fact, it's interesting. Walmart actually hires people to welcome people, but still it's not the same because some guy that's hired to say hello. It's not like you're walking into someone's store and the guy says hello. I don't know if this is true, but Reb Nachman of Breslov said that when Mashiach comes, the main mitzvah we'll be doing is Hachnosas Archim, welcoming guests. Because you could have the greatest AI intelligence. It doesn't compare to the simple act of love. Nobody could do that. I know somebody that she's very, very loving. Everybody loves her. Why? Because very warm. Or think about a child that has that love. The child can't give you anything. The other day I was in shul, and this cute little girl, she came over. She just gave me a hug, and it made me feel so good. And everybody loves this cute little girl. She's 3 years old. But what is she giving? She's giving her heart. She has an open heart. So it's actually a big tragedy when our heart gets closed, because if our heart gets closed, it's kind of the one thing that we have. Okay, you have a good head. So I hate to say it, there's a lot of other good heads. Today with AI, maybe there's going to be much better heads than all of our heads. But there can't be a heart. There cannot be any heart like your heart. With the heart that you bring to this world, only you can bring to this world. And so when we understand this, and when we're mature about it, because the immature heart is about loving, because love feels good and I love and it's sweet, but it's not so much about giving. The child has a lot of love, but it doesn't have a lot of giving because they're not mature enough to take responsibility and accountability to others. But when a person actually becomes a giver, then, and again, with AI, it may be super intelligent, but it's not a giver, right? It doesn't give to anyone. It's just a tool, like a hammer. It's like, I don't know, a great, today you could print homes, right? But it's not giving. It's not printing homes for the poor. It's just a tool that you can use for something. So we have to understand that it all boils down to our convictions and our heart that decides to lead a certain path. It's our choice to go in a certain direction. Yesterday we were discussing about, who did Hashem make the world for? Did he make it for your mind? Did he make it for your heart? Did he make it for your soul? So we said that the Rebbe brings down brought down in Tanya that it can't be for your soul because the soul was pristine, didn't need to come into this world. So rather, he made it, in a certain sense, you could say, for you, your emotional, intellectual self, and primarily for the choices that you make. As I say, there's no such thing as free choice. There's only choosing freely. Hashem made a world in which we would have these. Chassidus brings out that ultimately, it says, the Jewish people weren't shaykh. They weren't the idea that they should sin in a golden calf. God just gave them the Torah. They were raised to the highest heights. But Hashem can bring the Yetzer Hara to the point where the person gets conned and they do the con. So why does Hashem want that? Because ultimately Hashem wants the tshuva. As Alter Rebbe says, that the greatest, the deepest reason for this world is tshuva, the Baal tshuva. So why did Hashem do this? Hashem did this because it's like he wants your heart, he wants your choice. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov says, Rachmana liba boy, Hashem wants the heart. And that's what the Baal Shem Tov, what Rashbi said, Anan b'chavuvusa talya milsa. That we say that even though fear of God is such a great thing, but it's actually love of God that's the greatest thing. And the Rebbe says that in our generation, Hashem made it that we would come to him out of love. So we're a very unique generation, a generation in which I shouldn't say most, but a lot of the world allows the children to grow up freely, independently, which really is a very bizarre thing to do. Because a child that says, Ayer para Adam Yivoled, a child is born as a wild animal. So why would you let a wild animal go wild? It doesn't make sense. Many societies are very strict with children. But there's a certain benefit to what God did, where the Rebbe actually says that we in America, he says it can actually lead to certain narcissism. I can do whatever I want, but it also can lead to choice because you can do whatever you want. So therefore you can choose to do the right thing without feeling the societal pressure and having, as I said before, that inner resentment. Oh, I had to do this or I had to do that. So, let's do a little meditation that will help us overcome a sense of fear of people or anger and resentment and get ourselves into a sense of love. As the Baal Shem Tov says, we should actually have a sense that we should feel